The rain fell like sheets of glass that night, sharp, cold, relentless. The Texas plains had a way of swallowing sound when the storms rolled in, leaving only the whisper of wind and the low growl of thunder. But through the storm came something fragile, something small. A cry. The little girl ran as fast as her bare feet could carry her. Mud clung to her ankles, rocks cut into her skin, and her breath came in ragged bursts. Her dress, once a faded blue, was torn at the shoulders, soaked through, and plastered against her bruised back. She could still hear the echoes of his voice behind her, angry and slurred, shouting her name through the storm. She didn't dare look back. Her arms wrapped around herself, as if holding her ribs together could keep her from breaking apart. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to go. The lightning flashed across the open field, and in that brief light, she saw an old barn in the distance, its roof sagging, its wooden frame leaning like an old man's back. It was shelter, maybe even safety. She stumbled toward it, feet slipping in the mud, tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. By the time she reached the barn, her body was shaking so hard she could barely stand. She crawled through the gap under the doors and collapsed in the hay, gasping for air. Her knees bled, her palms were raw, and her lips trembled from both cold and fear. She hugged herself tighter, whispering, "Don't find me. Please don't find me." But someone did find her. A few miles away, at the edge of a ranch no one visited anymore, a man sat by the fire in silence. His hat hung low over his eyes, casting a long shadow over his unshaven face. They called him the Silent Cowboy. Once, his name had been known from town to town, Elias Hart, a man who could break a wild horse faster than any man alive. But now, he hardly spoke. Since the day his wife and little girl died in a fire, he hadn't been the same. He sold most of his horses, let his ranch rot, and spent his days in quiet, hollow routine, just surviving, never living. That night, though, something stirred him. It started as a faint sound, barely audible through the storm. A cry. He tried to ignore it at first, thinking it was the wind. But it came again, thin and weak, carried on the rain like a whisper begging to be heard. His brow furrowed. He stood, grabbed his lantern, and stepped out into the storm. The rain soaked through his coat instantly, but he kept walking, boots sinking deep into the mud. He followed the sound across the field, toward the old barn he hadn't used in years. When he pushed open the creaking door, the lantern light flickered across the hay, and there she was. A small figure, curled up tight, trembling like a trapped animal. Her hair was plastered to her face, and when she heard the door, she gasped, eyes wide with terror. Elias froze. He could see the bruises on her arms, the dirt smudged across her cheeks, the way she shrank back from the light as though it burned. "Hey," he said softly, his voice rough from disuse. "You hurt?" She didn't answer, just stared. He took a slow step forward, holding the lantern low so the light wouldn't blind her. "Ain't gonna hurt you," he murmured. "You're safe here." At the word safe, her eyes filled with tears. She shook her head, backing into the wall, her small hands raised as if to shield herself. "Please," she whimpered, voice breaking. "Please, don't beat me. I'm already hurt." The words hit him harder than a gunshot. Elias stood there, frozen, the storm raging outside, and in that moment, something deep inside him cracked. He saw his daughter again, her small hands, her gentle voice, her laughter echoing through the house that no longer stood. The pain he'd buried for years came flooding back, all at once, raw and suffocating. He set the lantern down slowly, kneeling so he wouldn't tower over her. His voice shook as he spoke. "Ain't nobody gonna beat you, little one. Not while I'm here." The girl stared at him through swollen eyes, searching for truth in his voice. He reached out carefully, offering his hand but not forcing it. After a long, trembling pause, she placed her small, shaking fingers into his calloused palm. And in that fragile touch, between a broken child and a broken man, something wordless passed between them. The storm outside kept raging, but for the first time in years, Elias felt something warm stir in his chest. Compassion, purpose, maybe even hope. The storm had quieted by the time dawn broke, leaving the air thick with the smell of wet earth and smoke from the small fire Elias had built inside the barn. The old place hadn't been used in years, but tonight it had become a refuge. The girl lay wrapped in a wool blanket, her face half hidden beneath the folds. She slept restlessly, twitching now and then, her little fists clenched as if even her dreams were trying to fight back. Elias sat a few feet away, elbows resting on his knees, staring into the flames. He hadn't planned for any of this. He was a man who had lived the past few years in silence, avoiding people, avoiding pain. But now, here she was, a broken child in his care, and something inside him refused to turn away. When she stirred, he rose quietly and reached for a tin pot of water warming near the fire. "You thirsty?" he asked. She blinked up at him, eyes red and wary. "Where am I?" "My barn," he said simply. "You're safe here." Her small body tensed. "He'll come for me." Elias's chest tightened. He crouched beside her, voice calm but firm. "Who's gonna come for you, sweetheart?" She hesitated, then whispered, "My pa." The word came out like it hurt to say. He said I wasn't worth nothing. Said I had to work for food. But I tried. I really did. I didn't mean to drop the lamp." Her voice cracked, and she covered her face with her hands. "I didn't mean to." Elias swallowed hard. The image of his own daughter flashed before him, her soft voice, her gentle laugh. It twisted something deep in his chest, something that had been locked away since the fire took her and his wife both. He had lost them because he hadn't been there to protect them. And now, fate, or maybe God, had dropped another lost soul in his path. He took a slow breath. "Ain't your fault, little one. Nothing that man did to you is your fault. You hear me?" She peeked at him through her fingers, unsure if she believed him. Elias turned, grabbed a small bowl of soup he'd made from the few supplies he had, and handed it to her. "Eat, you'll feel better." She stared at it for a long time before finally taking it. Her hands trembled so badly she spilled half of it on the floor, but she still muttered a quiet, "Thank you." "Don't thank me," he said gruffly, looking away. "Ain't done nothing yet." As she ate, he watched her in silence. The bruises on her arms were dark and ugly, some fresh, some old. She had a small scar near her temple, the kind no child should have. Rage flickered inside him, but he kept it buried under a calm expression. When she finished, she curled up near the fire again, her voice barely a whisper. "You talk funny," she said. Elias huffed softly through his nose. "Ain't talked much in a long while." "Why not?" He didn't answer. His eyes lingered on the flames. He couldn't bring himself to tell her that he'd lost everything that once gave him a reason to speak. That silence had become easier than feeling. Minutes passed before he finally said, "Used to have a little girl. Not much older than you. She liked horses. Could ride before she could walk. Near enough." The child looked at him with quiet curiosity. "What happened to her?" He hesitated. His jaw tightened, and his voice came out low. "Fire. Took her and her mama both." "I'm sorry," she whispered, her small voice trembling. He nodded once, eyes glistening in the dim light. "Me too." For a while, neither spoke. Only the crackle of fire filled the space. Then she said softly, "Maybe your little girl's in heaven. Maybe she's an angel now." Elias blinked, his throat tight. "Maybe," he said, almost to himself. "Maybe she is." When he looked at her again, she had started to doze off, clutching the blanket close. Her face looked peaceful for the first time. He stood, went to the doorway, and stared out across the land. The storm clouds were breaking, and a soft pink glow stretched over the horizon. He thought about what she'd said, that her father would come for her. He could tell by the bruises, by the fear in her eyes, that if that man did come, he'd bring more pain with him. Elias's hand curled into a fist. "No," he muttered under his breath. "He ain't comin' near her again." He turned back toward the sleeping girl, her fragile frame barely visible beneath the blanket. Something had changed in him, something he couldn't quite name. For the first time in years, Elias' heart felt alive again. Not because he wanted to live for himself, but because someone else needed him to. Morning light poured gently through the cracks in the barn walls, turning the floating dust into strands of gold. The storm had passed, leaving behind a silence so deep it almost hummed. The girl, her name, he'd learned, was Lily, was still asleep, curled up in the blanket, her breathing soft and steady. Elias watched her for a long moment, his heart heavy but steady, a strange calm settling in his chest. He hadn't slept. He'd sat up all night, thinking, about her words, about the bruises, about the kind of man who could do that to a child. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw his daughter's face in the firelight again, saw her small hand reaching for him, saw himself failing to reach back. He couldn't let it happen again. Not to Lily, not ever. As the sun rose higher, he stood, the boards creaking beneath his boots. He saddled his horse, a chestnut mare named June, who whinnied softly as if sensing his tension. He checked his revolver, something he hadn't touched in years, and holstered it. The weight felt heavy and familiar on his hip. Before he left, he crouched beside Lily and tucked the blanket tighter around her. For a moment, he hesitated. He wanted to tell her where he was going, to promise he'd be back soon. But he couldn't risk waking her, she'd be scared. So instead, he whispered, "You're safe now, darlin'. I'll see to that." Then he mounted June and rode toward the valley. The trail was rough, slick from the rain, and the air carried the faint scent of smoke from the chimneys below. He knew exactly which cabin he was looking for. Folks in town had whispered about a drunk who lived with his little girl down near the creek, a man who owed money, fought everyone, and spent more time with a bottle than a shovel. Elias's jaw tightened. That kind of man didn't deserve to call himself a father. When he reached the cabin, the sight of it made his stomach turn. The place was falling apart, boards rotted and roof caved in on one side. A broken bottle lay by the door, and the faint sound of snoring came from inside. Elias dismounted, tied June to a post, and stepped onto the porch. Each creak of the floorboards under his boots sounded like thunder in the quiet morning. He pushed open the door. The man inside stirred, blinking blearily through the haze of whiskey. He was thick-shouldered, with a greasy beard and a sneer that made Elias's hands clench. "Who the hell are you?" he slurred, sitting up. Elias said nothing at first. His silence stretched, filling the room like a storm about to break. Then, in a low, controlled voice, he said, "You've been beaten on a child." The man scoffed, picking up his bottle. "My own blood, ain't your concern, cowboy." Elias stepped closer, his shadow swallowing the light from the window. "It is now." The man laughed, but it was short-lived. Elias moved faster than the drunk could react. In one swift motion, he kicked the bottle aside and grabbed the man by the collar, slamming him back against the wall. "You ever lay a hand on her again," he hissed, his voice sharp as barbed wire, "and you won't have hands left to do it with." The man tried to fight back, swinging a wild fist, but Elias dodged easily. A moment later, he was on the ground, gasping for breath, his face bloodied. Elias didn't shoot him, he didn't need to. The message was clear enough. When he left, the cabin door hung crooked on its hinges, and the valley was quiet again. By the time he rode back, the sun was sinking low, painting the sky in streaks of orange and violet. Lily was awake, sitting by the fire, clutching a small stuffed horse he'd found in a box of old memories that morning. When she saw him, her face lit up with relief. "You came back," she said, voice small but full of hope. He dismounted slowly, his body aching but his heart strangely light. "Told you I would," he said softly. She ran up to him and hugged him around the waist. For a moment, Elias froze, the feeling of those small arms around him stirred something deep inside. Then he rested his rough hand gently on her head. "You ain't got to be scared no more," he said. "Ain't nobody comin' for you." She looked up at him, tears glimmering in her eyes. "Can I stay here, with you?" Elias nodded, his throat too tight to speak. In the days that followed, the barn became their home. He built her a small bed in the loft, found her clothes from the general store in town, and taught her to feed the horses. Each morning, she'd giggle as June nuzzled her hand, and every time she smiled, a piece of Elias's broken heart seemed to mend. The silent cowboy wasn't silent anymore. He started talking again, first to her, then to the neighbors, then to the world. Not much, but enough. Enough to live, enough to heal, and sometimes, when the wind howled across the plains and thunder rolled far in the distance, Lily would press close to him and whisper, "I'm not scared anymore."